The splash echoed across Maplewood Lake, followed by a triumphant shout. "I got one!" Children clapped from the nearby gazebo, pointing at the man reeling in a wriggling bass. He grinned, proud, holding it up for the audience like a trophy. For a moment the scene was pure suburban bliss, neighbors, nature, and a community lake sparkling in the afternoon sun. Until the shriek cut through it. "Absolutely not." Heads whipped around. Corinne Whitmore, HOA board member and Maplewood's self-proclaimed guardian of order, came storming down the path. Clipboard clutched tight, sunglasses perched on her nose, lips pursed like she was sucking a lemon. The man blinked at her. I was just fishing." Corinne stopped short, glaring at the dangling fish as if it were evidence in a criminal trial. Fishing is strictly prohibited in the lake. Section 7, subsection B, page 42 of the bylaws. She slapped the clipboard with her palm for emphasis. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors exchanged amused looks. The kids groaned. The man shrugged. "It's just one fish, there's plenty more." Corinne's eyes widened in horror. "That's not the point. This is private property. The ecosystem must be protected. Do you have any idea what reckless behavior like this can do?" The fish flopped in his hands. He gave her a sheepish grin. "Dinner." Gasps, laughter, phones recording. Corinne felt her cheeks blaze. "No, sir, what you have is a fine." She scribbled furiously, tore off a slip, and thrust it toward him. $200 for unauthorized use of the lake. The man's grin faltered. $200 for a fish. Corinne's voice was ice. For violating order, pay it or face escalation. By nightfall, the incident was all over the neighborhood group chat. Videos showed Corinne marching like a drill sergeant, her voice shrill as she waved her clipboard. Memes sprouted. Corinne photoshopped in a pirate hat guarding the HOA treasure lake. One post read, "She fined me for fishing, what's next, breathing HOA air." But instead of embarrassment, Corinne felt vindicated. People laughed because they didn't understand. Laughter was the weapon of the lazy, the undisciplined. Rules weren't supposed to be fun. Rules were supposed to be obeyed. Still, something gnawed at her as she sipped boxed Chardonnay and replayed the confrontation in her mind. The fisherman hadn't looked defeated. He hadn't begged forgiveness. He smirked. Smirks were dangerous. Smirks meant defiance, and defiance spread like wildfire. She jotted notes in her compliance log. Lake Enforcement Week. Consider stricter patrols, potential camera installation. Her pen paused, her eyes narrowed. Or ownership. The thought was absurd at first, but the more she sipped, the more it made sense. If the HOA owned the lake, then yes, she enforced rules, but if she owned the lake, then every rule would be hers alone to write. No board votes, no debates, just total pure order. By the time she drained her glass, Corinne had made a decision. She would find a way to make that lake hers. The next week, the HOA meeting was chaos. Half the room was furious at the fishing fine, the other half just tired of Corinne's constant crusades. Mark Andrews, her nemesis from the infamous driveway incident months prior, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "So let me get this straight. You find a guy for catching a fish on a lake we all technically own." Corinne adjusted her glasses. The lake is communal property and therefore subject to HOA rules. That man broke them. Enforcement was justified. $200 justified? Mark asked. What's next, charging ducks rent? The room erupted in laughter. Corinne's knuckles whitened around her pen. Mock me all you want, but rules are the only thing keeping Maplewood from falling into anarchy. An elderly board member sighed. Corinne, it's a lake, let people enjoy it, that's what it's for. Enjoyment without rules leads to chaos, Corinne snapped. Chaos leads to trash, pollution, invasive species. Mark cut her off with a smirk. You sound like Star Wars. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate. The laughter was louder this time. Corinne's ears rang with it. That night she slammed her binder shut and muttered, Fine, if they won't protect the lake, I will. Corinne threw herself into research. Property deeds, county tax records, old sales contracts buried in municipal files. She spent hours on hold with zoning departments, grilled clerks with questions, and scoured online forums for loopholes. And one afternoon, while sipping her third cup of black coffee in the county records office, she found it. The lake wasn't technically owned by the HOA. It was a shared amenity leased from the original developer, and that lease, it was about to expire. Her heart hammered as she photocopied the document. If the lease expired without renewal, the land reverted to private sale. Which meant the lake was about to be on the market. Which meant it could be hers. For weeks, Karen lived in secret excitement. She drafted financial plans, called banks, even considered mortgaging her home. It was reckless, but visionaries had to take risks. She pictured herself standing at the water's edge, clipboard in one hand, no trespassing signs gleaming in the sun. And when the sale notice finally posted online, Karen Whitmore pounced. The paperwork was grueling, the cost eye-watering, but she signed every page with steady determination. This wasn't just a purchase. This was destiny. The following HOA meeting began like any other, bickering, complaints, eye rolls, until Karen stood and cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice calm, controlled. "Effective immediately, Maplewood Lake is no longer communal property. I am the sole legal owner." The room froze. Mark laughed out loud. You bought the lake." Karen held up the deed with a flourish. "Yes, which means fishing, boating, or even walking within 10 feet of the water is now trespassing unless I approve it." Gasps, shouts, someone muttered, "She's lost her damn mind." Karen ignored them all, her smile sharp as glass. "So let this be clear, the days of chaos are over. The lake is mine, and none of you," she turned, eyes locking on Mark, "are allowed to use it." The room erupted. Half the neighbors shouted in outrage. The other half stared in stunned silence. Phones were already out, recording, sending her declaration rippling through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. And Karen. She stood at the center of the storm, triumphant. At last, Maplewood's lake was under true control. The next morning, Maplewood woke up to signs. Karen had been out before dawn, hammering metal posts into the dirt with a vigor that startled even herself. By 7 a.m., every path to the lake bore a fresh warning in bold red letters. Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. At the bottom of each sign in tiny print, authorized by owner Karen Whitmore. By the time families stepped out with strollers and joggers laced up their sneakers, the lake looked less like a community amenity and more like a military zone. "Is this a joke?" a teenager asked, tugging on one of the signs. Karen appeared from the bushes, clipboard in hand. "That's private property, young man. Touch it again and I'll have your parents fined for vandalism." The teen scoffed, "It's a lake." "It's my lake," Karen snapped, scribbling furiously onto her log. "And unless you've received express permission from me, you're trespassing." By noon, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. "Can someone explain why there are signs saying the lake is hers?" "She can't do that, can she?" LOL, only in Maplewood. Karen didn't respond. She had bigger priorities. She had already drafted permit applications, yes, permits. If anyone wanted to fish, swim, or even stand near the water, they'd have to submit a written request. She had copies ready in a neat stack by her front door, along with a lockbox for application fees. That afternoon, Ethel and Norm, her loyal compliance watch sidekicks, arrived to help. Ethel clapped her hands in delight when she saw the signs. "Oh, Karen, this is marvelous. Really puts the fear of God into them." Norm squinted at the lockbox. "How much you charging for permits?" Karen's smile was thin. $50 for a day pass, $300 for a season pass, strictly non-refundable. Norm whistled. "That'll stir the pot." "That's the point," Karen said. "If they truly value the lake, they'll follow the rules. If not, they'll stay out. Either way, order is preserved." The first confrontation came that evening. A family of 4 had set up lawn chairs near the water, cooler at their feet. The father was baiting a hook when Karen swooped in. "Excuse me," she barked. "This is private property. Do you have a permit?" The father blinked. "A what?" "A permit issued by me, the owner of this lake. No permit, no fishing." The mother frowned. "We've lived here 12 years. We've always used this lake." Karen's jaw tightened. "And for 12 years you've been freeloading off a system that no longer exists. Pay the fee or pack up." The father chuckled in disbelief. "Lady, I'm not paying you $50 to sit by the water." Karen's smile vanished. She pulled out her phone. "Then I'll call the sheriff. Trespassing is a criminal offense." The kids looked frightened. The parents cursed under their breath as they shoved folding chairs into their trunk and drove off. Karen scribbled triumphantly in her log, violation prevented, order restored. But for every victory, Karen made more enemies. By the end of the week, she had filed 8 trespassing reports with the county sheriff. Only one resulted in deputies showing up, and when they did, they were less than thrilled. "Ma'am," the deputy sighed, hands on his belt. "We're not coming out here every time a neighbor steps near the water. You bought the lake, fine, but this is excessive." Karen bristled. "Excessive is watching your community drown in lawlessness. If you won't uphold the law, I'll escalate." The deputy exchanged a look with his partner. "Don't make us escalate on you, ma'am." Karen's hands shook as she clutched her clipboard, but her voice stayed steady. "If I have to stand alone, I will. I've done it before." Maplewood divided overnight. Half the neighborhood was furious. Kids cried when told they couldn't swim. Joggers complained their lakeside route was ruined. Longtime residents muttered darkly that Karen had stolen their amenity. The other half surprisingly admired her nerve. "You've got to admit," one neighbor whispered, "it takes guts. She actually bought the damn lake." Karen fed on both reactions. Praise or outrage, it didn't matter. Attention meant power, and power meant order. Still, one face haunted her, Mark. He hadn't said much since her announcement. No sarcastic quips at meetings, no public jabs. He just watched, smiling, waiting. Karen hated that smile more than she hated trespassers. It was the smile of someone who knew something she didn't. Her suspicion was confirmed 2 weeks later. Karen was patrolling the shoreline at dusk, binoculars in hand, when she spotted movement near the far dock. She crept closer, her heels crunching on gravel. There he was, Mark. Sitting on the dock, feet dangling, fishing rod in hand. Calm, defiant, smiling. Karen's blood boiled. "You're trespassing," she shouted, storming toward him. Mark didn't even flinch. He reeled in slowly, the line glistening in the twilight. "Actually, I'm not." Karen froze. "What?" Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. He held it up. "Deed records. Turns out while you bought the lake itself, you didn't buy the easements. This dock, still community property." Karen snatched the paper, scanning it with trembling hands. He was right. The dock and a 10-foot perimeter around it was excluded from her purchase. Mark leaned back, grinning. "So technically I can fish here all I want, and the best part, everyone else can too." Her vision blurred with rage. You smug little." "Careful, Karen," Mark said, packing up his rod. "Wouldn't want to get cited for disturbing the peace, again." The neighbors who'd gathered nearby burst out laughing. Someone filmed the whole thing. Karen's humiliation was sealed before she even stormed back home. That night she stared at the easement clause under the dim glow of her lamp. Her fortress of control had a hole in it, and Mark was already marching through. But she wouldn't let him win. She couldn't. Her pen scratched furiously across her notepad, close dock access, build fence, file injunction, expand ownership. If the dock was the loophole, then she would close it, permanently. Karen's eyes narrowed, a thin smile creeping across her face. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself, "not by a long shot." Karen Whitmore didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the image of Mark on her lake dock replaying in her mind like a cruel loop. His smirk, his calm tone, the laughter of the neighbors, it gnawed at her like termites in the beams of a house. By sunrise, she was already dressed in khakis, polo shirt tucked tight, and marching across her lawn with a tape measure. If the dock was an easement loophole, then she would fix the loophole with wood, nails, and a very big lock. By mid-morning, she had hired a contractor. "What do you mean you want a fence?" the man asked, scratching his head. "Not just a fence," Karen insisted, waving her clipboard like a general's baton. "A security barrier around the dock with a locking gate, 6 feet high, preferably barbed wire on top." The contractor laughed nervously. Ma'am, this is a community area. Don't think the HOA's gonna approve barbed wire around the lake." Karen leaned in, eyes narrowing. "I'm not asking for approval, I own the lake. And as for the dock, it's a liability hazard. Children could drown. This is about safety. Safety always wins." She said it with such conviction the man actually nodded. By the time he left, she had a quote and a start date. Karen smiled for the first time in days. The dock's days were numbered. The fence went up fast. Neighbors gathered like it was a live spectacle, phones out. voices rising in outrage as workers drilled posts and hauled chain-link panels. Children cried when they saw their beloved fishing spot boxed in like a cage. "What the hell, Karen?" someone shouted. Karen, standing proudly with her clipboard, replied coolly, "It's for your safety. You're welcome." Mark appeared mid-afternoon, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're really doing this? You think you can just fence off community land?" Karen's smile was razor-thin. "Correction, I can fence off my lake, and if the dock is unsafe, it's my duty to act. If you disagree, feel free to file a complaint." Mark's grin widened. "Oh, don't worry, I already did." The complaint came in hot. Within days, the county zoning office sent her a notice. The fence violated local ordinances and had to be removed. Karen nearly tore the letter in half. "They can't stop me," she hissed, packing her kitchen. "They don't understand what's at stake." Ethel tried to console her. "Karen, maybe you should just let it go. You've made your point." "Let it go," Karen snapped. "That dock is a gateway to chaos. If I surrender now, I might as well hand Mark the keys to the whole lake. No, I'll appeal. I'll fight this in court if I have to." Norm shifted uncomfortably. "Court's expensive." Karen slammed her clipboard down. "Order is priceless." The standoff escalated. Mark organized dock parties. Dozens of neighbors gathered outside the fence, lawn chairs and coolers in tow, chanting, "OUR dock, OUR dock." Someone painted the words on a banner and tied it to the chain link. Karen countered with nightly patrols. Flashlight in hand, she prowled the shoreline like a warden, jotting down names and faces. She even installed motion-activated sprinklers around the fence, soaking anyone who got too close. One evening a neighbor muttered, "She's lost it." Karen whipped around, eyes blazing. "I have not lost it. I've found it. Discipline, responsibility. None of you would last a week without people like me keeping order." Phones recorded, memes multiplied. Someone edited her voice shouting "discipline" over a techno beat. It went viral in the local Facebook group. Karen gritted her teeth, determined not to crack. "Let them laugh," she told herself. "History always mocks visionaries at first." But cracks were forming. The fines she'd hoped to collect from trespassing permits, barely a trickle, the legal notices piling up, her savings account shrinking fast. And then came the letter that made her blood run cold. It was from the HOA board. A special meeting had been called to discuss disciplinary action regarding member misconduct. Karen stormed into Ethel's living room, waving the letter. "They're coming after me, the one who's actually protecting this community." Ethel looked uneasy. "Karen, they say you've overstepped. The fence, the permits, the deputies, people are mad." Karen's hands shook. "Of course they're mad. Children throw tantrums when you take away their toys. That doesn't mean you give the toy back. It means you double down." Norm sighed, "Or it means you're digging your own grave." Karen ignored him. She was already drafting her speech for the meeting. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. More neighbors than Karen had ever seen squeezed into the folding chairs, buzzing with anticipation. At the front table, the HOA president cleared her throat. "We are here to address serious concerns regarding board member Karen Whitmore's recent actions surrounding Maplewood Lake." Karen shot to her feet before the woman could finish. "You mean my ownership of Maplewood Lake? Let be clear." Murmurs rippled through the room. Mark raised a hand. "Point of order, she doesn't own the dock." Laughter broke out. Karen's face flushed red. "That dock is a parasite, and if you had any decency, you'd support my efforts to protect you all from yourselves." The president frowned. "Karen, this isn't about decency. This is about legality. You cannot fence off community access, you cannot fine people without due process, and you cannot harass neighbors with sprinklers." "I did what had to be done," Karen shot back, "because none of you had the courage." A voice from the back yelled, "You're a dictator, not a neighbor." Applause erupted. Karen's pulse pounded in her ears. She raised her clipboard like a shield. "You don't understand. Without rules, we're nothing. Without me, Maplewood crumbles." Mark stood smirking. "Funny, Karen, from where I'm standing, Maplewood seems to be crumbling because of you." The room cheered. Phones recorded every second. For the first time in years, Karen felt the ground slipping under her. When the vote was called, her fate was sealed. "Effective immediately," the president announced, "Karen Whitmore is removed from the HOA board." Gasps, cheers, some neighbors clapped, others shouted with joy. Karen's vision tunneled. Removed her, the architect of order. She stumbled back, clutching her clipboard to her chest, as if it were the last thing tethering her to reality. Mark leaned close as she passed him on her way out, voice low so only she could hear. You lost, Karen, and now the lake's just a hole you threw your money into. Her breath caught. She wanted to scream to claw that smug smile off his face, but instead she walked out in silence. That night, Karen sat alone by the lake. The fence loomed behind her, a monument to her defeat. The water rippled gently, mocking her with its calm. She clenched her fists. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. She'd lost the board, lost face, maybe even lost the neighborhood. But she still had the deed, she still had the lake. And as long as she held that deed, she had power. Karen whispered into the dark, they think they've won, but they don't know me. The lake lapped quietly at the shore, like it was listening. Karen Whitmore wasn't beaten, not yet. She repeated that mantra every morning as she rose before dawn, staring at the lake through her blinds like a general surveying a battlefield. Yes, she'd been humiliated at the HOA meeting. Yes, the dock was still accessible. Yes, her neighbors mocked her. But she had the deed. The piece of paper that said Maplewood Lake belonged to her, and until someone pried it from her cold, clipboard-clutching hands, she wasn't giving up. So when the county ordered her to remove the fence, Karen didn't panic. She schemed. They can't force me to tear it down if it's not technically a fence, she told Ethel and Norm over tea. What does that mean? Ethel asked warily. Karen leaned forward, eyes gleaming. It means I'll build something else, a dock house, private storage, a personal retreat, call it what you want. If it has 4 walls and a roof, it's not a fence, it's property. Norm groaned. Karen, this is getting insane. Karen's smile sharpened. Discipline always looks insane to the undisciplined. Within a week, contractors were back. This time they were building what Karen described as her lakeside retreat. It was little more than a glorified shed, 10 feet high, bolted directly over the dock, with a padlocked door. The community watched in outrage as their access point vanished under plywood and tar paper. Children cried, parents cursed. Mark nearly choked with laughter when he saw it. She built a birdhouse for herself, he told a gathering crowd, except it's for the world's angriest bird. Karen ignored them all, proudly hanging a private owner-use-only sign on the new door. She even installed a chair and a folding table inside, declaring it her command center. Let them whine, she whispered, running her hands along the wood. They can't touch me now. But they did touch her. Within days, the HOA filed an emergency injunction, arguing the shed violated zoning codes and blocked community easement rights. The county inspector arrived with a clipboard of his own, looking unimpressed. Ma'am, this structure has to come down. Karen met his gaze, steel in her voice. Over my dead body. The inspector sighed. Then it'll come down by court order. Karen's hands trembled, but she forced her voice calm. I'll appeal. I'll fight this all the way to the state Supreme Court if I must. He scribbled something on his sheet and muttered, Lady, it's a shed, not the Constitution. The showdown reached its peak one sweltering Saturday afternoon. Mark and several neighbors marched to the dock, bolt cutters in hand. Karen was already waiting, seated inside her shed throne, megaphone at the ready. This is trespassing, her voice boomed across the water. You are violating private property rights. Mark raised the cutters, and you're violating ours. The crowd cheered, phones recorded. Sweat poured down Karen's temples, but she refused to budge. You'll regret this, she shrieked. I have the law on my side. Mark smirked. Funny, the county says otherwise. The cutters snapped. The padlock fell. The crowd roared as the shed door swung open. Karen lunged forward, trying to block the entrance with her body. But the momentum was too much. Neighbors surged in, shoving past her, tearing down signs, ripping boards loose. Karen's cries dissolved into the chaos. Vandals, criminals, you'll all pay for this. By the time the dust settled, the shed was gone, reduced to a pile of splintered wood at the shoreline. Karen stood trembling, hair wild, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. The crowd slowly dispersed, triumphant. Mark lingered, giving her one last grin. Looks like the lake's back where it belongs, he said softly. With the people, not you. Corinne said nothing. She couldn't. Her voice had cracked somewhere between the padlock and the splinters. The weeks that followed felt like exile. Neighbors avoided her or, worse, laughed openly when she passed. The HOA formally banned her from holding any future board position. Her phone buzzed with memes of her megaphone meltdown. Even Ethel and Norm stopped coming by as often. Ethel mumbled something about taking a break, and Norm muttered about too much heat. For the first time in years, Corinne found herself utterly alone. She sat by the window one evening, staring at the lake. It looked so calm, so peaceful, as if mocking her efforts to control it. She whispered to herself, "They don't deserve it, they never did." But then came the letter. It was small, plain, tucked in her mailbox without a return address. Just one line typed neatly in the center of the page. "The deed still makes you the owner. Use it wisely." Corinne read it 3 times, her pulse quickening. It was true. Despite the humiliation, despite the shed's destruction, despite everything, the deed was still hers. She still held the ultimate trump card. A slow smile spread across her face. Maybe she'd been too direct, too loud, too visible. Power didn't always mean fences and fines. Sometimes power worked best in the shadows. She folded the letter carefully, slid it into her clipboard, and whispered into the empty room. "They think I'm finished, but this is only the beginning." That night, neighbors celebrated around the dock, believing the storm had passed. Corinne watched from her window, silent, a glass of wine in her hand. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, calm and beautiful. But in Corinne's mind, it wasn't theirs anymore. It never had been. It was hers, and she wasn't done with it, not yet.